Rhode Island Senator Jack Reed joins me now. Happy holidays to you, Senator. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Kristen.
So before we talk about unemployment insurance benefits, I want to get your reaction to the terrorist attacks in Russia. What does it mean for the Sochi Olympics? Should Americans feel nervous about heading over there?
Well, as your reporter pointed out, the security in Sochi itself is elaborate, extensive. They're taking every precaution to prevent any incidents there. But that, ironically, opens up other parts of the country to terrorist attacks. And clearly, these two recent attacks in Volgograd are inspired by or directed by or trying to disrupt the security and sense of security in Russia. And it's related to the Olympics, and there could be more attacks. So I think anyone going to Russia has to be mindful, but I think the security around Sochi is going to be particularly intense. But again, their attempts could be made to try to do something in Sochi or any place else in Russia.
All right. And Senator, I want to get to unemployment insurance benefits. I know you are working with your colleague, Senator Heller, on a bipartisan deal. What are you hearing from your GOP colleagues so far? Are you confident this could pass through the Senate and ultimately through the House?
I hope it will pass. We're working very hard. Senator Heller and I have bipartisan legislation. It'll be a 3-month extension. We hope we can secure a procedural vote on January 6th when we return, so we can take up the measure and pass it.
Senator, do you think you have the votes right now? If you had to take a vote count right now, do you think you'd have enough votes?
We're working very hard to get the votes. We think we have a running start. Great momentum. I'm very pleased this is a bipartisan effort, and it reflects, too, a phenomenon that is not a Republican or Democratic, a blue or red state phenomenon. There are states across the country. Nevada leads. Rhode Island, unfortunately, is second in unemployment. But you have states like Mississippi and Tennessee and Arizona that have above 8% unemployment, and particularly long-term unemployment. And so we're appealing to our colleagues based on two fundamental facts. First, the right thing to do for these 1.3 million Americans, and that number will increase in the next few weeks and months. And then second, this is good for the economy. It's been estimated that if we do not extend unemployment benefits, we'll lose 200,000 jobs next year and about 0.25% of economic growth or GDP growth. So for both economic reasons and for being fair and helping people. And one other point I want to make is that typically what we're seeing in the long-term unemployment are men and women who've worked a long time. Many of them are in their 50s. Many of them have responsibilities to their children or to their own parents. They can't pick up and leave to go to some place that's got a low unemployment rate. They need the help. And I think on those grounds, we're going to make progress.
And, Senator, I've been talking to Republicans on the Hill who say they're not going to support this legislation unless it is offset in some way. Your legislation, as I understand it, currently doesn't come with offsets. Why not? And how do you get Republicans, particularly in the House, to sign off on this if it's not offset?
Well, our legislation is specifically designed to be 3 months in duration. It will give us the time, the Ways and Means Committee and the Finance Committee, to look for offsets. And there are a long list of offsets. There are many, many corporate loopholes that should be closed in and of themselves, but particularly if they're used to pay for this benefit would be, I think, a step forward. But you can't overnight turn around and say, well, here's our list, take it or leave it. In fact, one of the ironies is many of those same people who say, well, I won't vote for it unless there's offsets, won't offer any offsets unless they say generically, well, let's cut some other program. That's sort of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Let's cut other benefits that people depend upon so we can fund these benefits. No, I think we can find the offsets, but we need time. And in addition to that, in the next 3 months, there are several other measures that have to be considered. We have extension of tax provisions that have to be looked at. We've got an additional round of support for Medicare payments to doctors. So we hopefully could be able to put this all together with appropriate offsets if necessary.
Senator, let me just ask you one more more. Let me just ask you one more on this point.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you say to the Americans who've lost their unemployment insurance benefits this weekend, who say they feel like they're staring over the edge of a cliff? They don't feel like 3 months is long enough. They think that you're just kicking the can down the road. What do you say to those Americans who say it's just not long enough, it's not good enough?
I think they're right, but I think what we want to do is make sure they have something while we work for a long-term solution. The worst thing would be to just turn our backs and walk away and say, well, it's over. We can't do that. Again, these people, and one of the things about unemployment compensation, you have to work. These are working men and women. Many of them have worked for 10, 20, 30 years. This is the first time they've had a serious situation of unemployment and they can't find jobs. They've been looking desperately. We have to help these people. And I'd like to be able to say we have a year's arrangement we could put in place today, but to get the kind of, to just keep the program going, we thought, and Senator Hall and I thought, that a 3-month extension, giving us the time to look at changes and funding mechanisms and all those things would be the appropriate way to go, not leave the people high and dry. Give them some hope that we're going to fix this in a longer-term basis.
And Senator, finally, I want to get your take on the New York Times report that came out over the weekend that reignited the debate over what actually led to the attack against the U.S. consulate in Benghazi back on September 11th, 2012. The report saying there doesn't seem to be a link to al-Qaeda, and that video, that American-made video, which many perceived as being anti-Islam, was in fact at the root of this attack. What do you make of this report, and does it change the narrative and what we understand to have happened?
I believe it's a very thoughtful report. It's well researched. It's based on interviews on the ground with Libyans who were there, who participated, carefully put together. And it raises serious questions that contradict the dialogue or the story that many Republicans particularly are trying to paint. It raises questions about whether there was any significant al-Qaeda involvement. It suggests, in fact, the confused tribal and radical Islamic elements that were in Benghazi itself could have been responsible. In fact, it points to an individual who even his fellow Libyans suggest is unstable and anti-American as well as anti-Gaddafi. So it suggests the complexity on the ground. And it also does, once again, remind us that that viral YouTube video was being shown on Benghazi cable, that coming from Egypt, that it was causing concern. And it paints the picture of that evening in the confusion. Mm-hmm. The first attack appeared to be deliberate, but then there was a mob, and then there was looting, and then finally they moved the activity over to a few miles away to the CIA annex, and then there seemed to be a more deliberate attack. So it does suggest very serious questions, and it raises questions, I think appropriate questions, contrary to the narrative that some were suggesting, Republicans, that there was a deliberate, very calculated, very meticulously planned by al-Qaeda central attack.
All right.
That the White House should have anticipated.
All right, Senator Jack Reed, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Well, the Obama administration is trying to put the problem